You might be surprised by what your team doesn't know. We're getting into that today on the Church Revitalization Podcast.
Hello, and welcome to the Church Revitalization Podcast, brought to you by the Malfers Group team, where each week we tackle important, actionable topics to help churches thrive. And now, here's your hosts, Scott Ball and AJ Matthew.
Welcome to the Church Revitalization Podcast. My name is Scott Ball. I'm joined by my friend and co-host, AJ Matthew. All right. If you are on YouTube, if you're watching the podcast today on YouTube, which I always encourage you to do, and you should subscribe so that you can leave comments there and we can interact with you in ways that we can't just on the audio podcast. You will be treated today to this t-shirt that says, I'd rather be outside or outdoors.
Yes.
Yeah.
A beautiful scene there.
Yeah, a shirt that I wear, ironically, because I'm an indoor cat. Anyway, so I want to tell you a quick story. I was in St. Louis a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
Flown in, got there early, and I had a while till I needed to be somewhere. So I looked up on Yelp, like a local coffee shop that had a high rating.
Yeah.
We'll sit, and because at this point the leaves were changing. It was beautiful.
I like where this is going.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So and the weather was pretty nice. Like it was maybe 65 degrees or something. So comfortable enough to sit outside, not too cool, but not too hot.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I get to this coffee shop, pull up, and there's some people sitting outside at a little cafe table. And they look at my shirt, and this woman who's sitting at the table with this guy, she says, "Oh, I love your shirt. Me too." She's like, and isn't it a great day to be sitting outside drinking a cup of coffee? And I said, "Oh, I'm wearing this shirt ironically."
You gave it up? Man,
I totally did. I totally did. Because I was about to be betrayed by the fact that once I bought my coffee, I wasn't coming and sitting outside.
Oh, I thought you were saying you were going to sit outside because it was so nice.
No, I sat inside near a window where I could see the outside. In my defense, I actually would have sat outside, but I needed to plug my computer in because it had low battery. So by necessity, I had to sit inside. I would have sat out there. I would have endured it. But yes, so if you're watching on YouTube, you can see my beautiful, I'd rather be outdoors. My wife laughs every time I wear it because she's like, you would not rather be outdoors. And it's true.
Man. Yeah, I could go for 65. I'd be drinking. Well, I don't drink cold coffee drinks. I like hot coffee. But yeah, man, I would love to sit outside. Man, good coffee shop. Caribou Coffee chain up in the more northern, although I think DFW Airport might have a Caribou Coffee.
Yeah, it's got one.
But the one I really liked was in Minnesota, and they had a fireplace in there. I was up there in the winter, and crackling fire in the Caribou Coffee. Oh boy, that's the joy right there, man.
It's good. It's just I think their drinks, like if you don't get, depending on what you get, they can be really sweet. Like
well, I don't use sweetener in my coffee at all. So,
you just got like a regular
plain old latte.
Okay. Then you were probably fine. But if you get any of their specialty drinks, I can't get them because they're just like sickly sweet.
Even for you, too sweet.
Too sweet. Anyway, you're saying that, AJ, but I'm not like I'm not a big sweets guy.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. It's always me that wants to get ice cream when we travel together.
Yeah, you're like, let's get some ice cream, and
you don't turn it down. You usually participate. But...
That's fair. Yeah, fair. I mean, it would be rude to watch you eat ice cream.
But I would be totally fine with that because I'm eating ice cream regardless.
I'm not generally going to volunteer. I'm not going to be like, hey, let's go for ice cream. No, like that'd be not something I'd be up for. Well, this is kind of the hard-hitting content you can get on the Church Revitalization Podcast. Let's dive into the topic. Anyway, All right. So today we're talking about competency bias, which is
Mhm.
something you may not have thought about. And I think this is it's a good topic that you've selected for today, AJ. Um, because it's more of a problem than pastors realize, and they bump into it more than I think they might assume that they do.
Mhm.
And if you're not aware, competency bias is simply um, when you know something and you assume that other people know it too, and you act and behave and interact with people based on the assumption that they know things that they don't really know. And so what we find, we see this a lot when we work with churches, and I'm sure pastor, church leader listening to this, you maybe see this too, where people you kind of thought people knew something, and then you discover that they don't. So we're going to kind of cover briefly, three quick areas where we see this happen commonly, and then we're going to give some solutions on how you can combat the problem of competency bias and kind of raise up the level of competence among your team so that you can have a healthier church. Is that a fair maybe
Yeah.
overview where we're going?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think it can be one of those things, unless you are conscious of this being the potential issue. I think you could find yourself in situations where it's just kind of confusing. Like, why are they not getting this? Or how come I'm not getting the expected performance or results? And this may just not be on your radar as having been the root cause. So I think, yeah, as you said, we want to raise this to a conscious level for you,
Yeah.
to be on the lookout, BOLO, for the gap in understanding and knowledge. So
Did you say bolo?
yeah, be on lookout, be on the lookout.
Oh,
It's a police term.
put that on the list of terms I didn't know.
I was under the assumption you had the same knowledge about police terms, and so you're based on your reaction now. I'm
What
gonna have
about
to.
given the whole conversation that we just had, would make you think I know anything about
Yeah.
how the police works?
Well, I'm glad I'm aware of competency bias. So now I know I need to talk to you about BOLO. Okay. So the first common area that we see this is in elder leadership. So frequently, um, what, well, a lot of churches move into an elder model that didn't previously have it, but that's not always the case in which you might find this. Churches that even have had existing elder boards for a long time, there may be a disconnect between the pastor who might have specific ideas or even be operating under exploration of scripture to see what elders should be doing or should not be doing, and there's a gap between the way the elders are actually functioning, maybe how they relate to the pastor, how they relate to one another, how they relate to the church or the staff. There's a lot of areas in which there could be a disconnect happening here. um, we see a lot of effort put into investigation and questioning and interviewing regarding the character of elders, and that should 100% be as it is, because that is the most important thing. But the capacity of the elder also needs to be investigated, and there needs to be some training. There's got to be some ground rules. There's got to be some descriptions about what the role looks like, and a clear understanding about how the elders should relate in these various levels, up and down and internally. So this is just one of the areas that we see, Scott, that I think a pastor might be thinking to himself here, or have an ideal, like, here's what the elder board should be doing. And then
Mhm.
there's a lot of frustration that happens on both parts. The elders may be frustrated with what's going on with the pastor, and the pastor's frustrated with the elders. And it's because we've got missed expectations due to an understanding or a knowledge about maybe what's the right function,
Mhm.
that could be easily sometimes repaired.
Yeah, yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head, and I don't have a lot to add. I would just say that it's a common problem that I think maybe part of it is we just see people's competence for things in other areas of their life. Like they seem to be good at their business, or they seem to be good
Mhm.
at even just leading as a volunteer or in their home or something like that. And those are certainly all indicators that someone has the capacity or the ability to grow and to be a healthy elder potentially. But that doesn't mean that they know all the things that they need to know in order to be effective. And so, um, when it comes to placing people in these key positions, the last thing you should do is make assumptions about what they know, and you need to be sure.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and then even once they're in it, there's a difference between head knowledge and sort of hand knowledge, the ability to execute at that level. And so there's going to be a lot of reminding and a lot of coaching up and a lot of encouraging one another. And so um, don't be discouraged when you have elders who are inexperienced or elders who have, I don't even know what you would call this, who maybe have technically a lot of years as elders, but they haven't been very effective.
Mm-hmm.
Misexperience. I don't know what you'd call that.
Mm.
Uh, don't be too discouraged by that and just take it from where you're at and start building them up. But yeah, I agree with you. This is an area that, depending on the situation, can have devastating consequences if you make too many assumptions. Um, Most of the time, it's not devastating. It's just frustrating. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, I agree with you.
Well, you mentioned a specific thing that I think is important and maybe a common misconception is that they're a great business owner, they're a great lawyer or accountant, or they have a lot of success, a high degree of success in their secular business roles, and that automatically just transfers and makes them a great elder as well, simply because it's just what maybe is even seen as sort of a parallel leadership position. And there's a lot of specifics to being an elder, and this doesn't even need to be specifically elder, like church board, church council. We're mainly talking about like an upper level or top level leadership board in the church. But obviously it's very different from leading a business. I mean, there's a level
Mhm.
of theology knowledge that has to be in place to make right decisions, biblically based decisions. There's got to be a prayer life involved, that's not necessarily a knowledge or training problem, but it is a very different role than it is out in the business world.
Yeah.
And
Oh man.
so,
The whole incentive structure is different, just because you can manage a team of people who have to be there isn't the same as leading a group of people who choose to be there.
yeah,
Like it's a different the whole situation is different. And so I think there are often just a lot of assumptions that this skill is going to translate. And the raw skill probably does translate, but when there's that gap between here's what this is really like and here's what the skill is, often requires some building up there and some filling in of the gaps. And we see this a
yeah,
lot when we work with churches through strategic planning, because they'll go, "Oh, I've done strategic planning in my business. I already
hmm
know this stuff." And it's
hmm
like, it's not the same. It's different. It's a totally different approach. It's a totally different way of thinking. Some of the terms may be the same, but we don't use them the same way. And they have different significance and all those things. So yeah, this is an area for sure where there's
yeah,
competency bias.
yeah. The next one that is common is in the area of mission in the church. And if you've listened to the podcast for any amount of time, when we say that, we're always talking about the Great Commission, the mandate that Christ gave to the church. And I think there's two, similar and related competency bias issues when it comes to mission when we're leading our church from the top or near top positions of leadership. Although I think this also transfers down to various levels of leadership. One, and maybe this would be the most surprising, that people by default do even know what the Great Commission is. And maybe
Mm.
some of you are like, "What? Who hasn't heard of that?" Well, ask around and you'll find out. People haven't. So I think that's one. Simply assuming that the Great Commission itself is known when you use that term. Um, so I think that's one to watch out for. And then the second level is that the people that do know what that is, they could maybe recite it by memory or get pretty close to paraphrasing it, but they really have never been taught or understand how to actually transfer that into strategy and function in the church. It's one thing to be able to memorize, the Matthew passage or some of the other similar Great Commission passages, but it's another thing to really think about, what does this look like in practice? So I think those
Mhm.
are the two areas specifically related to mission that we've got to be careful as leaders to make sure that when we just throw this out in a staff meeting or volunteer meeting or even a training regarding other things in the church, that that's not just a stone skipping off the water, as received by the hearer, that really actually sinks in and makes sense to them.
Yeah, there was a Barna study that went around. Gosh, I guess this was a few years ago. This was 2018. And maybe we can include some of these graphics from Barna in this article. But
Mm-hmm.
51% of churchgoers don't even, like self-reported, don't even know what the Great Commission is. So over half
Yeah.
don't. And an additional 25% know what it is, but they can't recall it exactly. And then Barna gave people 5 different passages, and asked what which one of these is the Great Commission? Like, can you pick it out of a multiple choice list? And a plurality of people, 37%, um, was able to identify it. That's a good thing. But a third, 33, almost as many people, weren't sure if any of the listed passages were the Great Commission, and then the rest picked the wrong one.
Mm.
That's the Great Commission. And so there's your evidence that it's not just self-reported. Like, I'm not sure, when actually given the choice, like, here's some verses. Which one of these is the Great Commission? Only a little more than a third of churchgoers were able to correctly select the Matthew passage.
I love the
Um,
2%. The 2% that think give back to Caesar what is Caesar's and to God what is God's is the Great Commission. Those
that's the
people,
Great Commission. Yeah.
those people are like, can I pay more taxes, please? Is it okay if I just send you more money?
They're the 2%.
Yeah. Well, that's
Uh,
no small number, but yeah, this is a good stat. I mean, that 2/3 of, well, that 1/3 of people could identify it, and 1/3, really 2/3 could not. So,
yeah, and
uh,
again, this is from 5 years ago, so almost 6 years ago at this point. Um, what are the odds biblical literacy has gone up?
mm,
Probably not great.
well,
Not
as
great
we
odds.
talked last week, there's fewer people in church than there were 5 years ago. So it's
Yeah.
unlikely knowledge has increased. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great point. So all of that to say, you might be listening to this thinking that is ridiculous. All of my folks know the Great Commission. You
Mm,
shouldn't assume that. You for sure should not assume that that's the case. And if you can do better than the 37% in the Barna study, that's great. But I'm almost certain you're not going to be at 100%.
yeah. Yep. And then again, it's a whole other discussion about, having a deep understanding of that and how it relates to formation of ministries in the church and decisions that you make about outreach, and sermon series and curriculum, at all ages in the church. I mean, everything connects back to, are we
Mm,
or are we not on mission to make and mature disciples of Jesus? And so if your highest level decision makers don't have a deep understanding of this and the implications that every decision they make would have in the effective pursuit of that, then you have problems. You've got a correctable situation that can improve, how effective you are at living that mission out. So
yeah.
this might just be money on the table. I mean, you're just leaving stuff laying around that could easily, low hanging fruit, that could improve, how your church is in this respect. So I think that's a good one.
Yeah, I know. I won't. We don't need to get stuck here, but I mean, just think about that. How could you possibly, as a church, have unity in direction if your people don't even understand the, if your mission is rooted in the Great Commission, but most of your people, or even a third of them, don't know, optimistically what the Great Commission is. You can't have unity, not real unity. And so this is a real problem, and you shouldn't make assumptions. And that's why it's so important that you have a Great Commission mission statement that you are repeating on a regular basis so that you can build up that knowledge and unity among the church.
A lack of conflict does not naturally mean unity.
Or unity.
It might simply mean a lack of clarity around what we should be unified around. And so people are just, they're fine with their own beliefs and understandings.
Yeah, that's right. All right, moving on.
Our third one is discipleship. So discipleship, again, it kind of has a couple of different layers to it, like mission. First of all, what do we even mean by the word? Because Scott, you and I have a lot of conversations with pastors and church leaders and educators, and just throwing out the word discipleship, like, yeah, well, we got this thing we're doing over here with discipleship in the church, and you're going to get head nods all day long. But unless you get into the details about what exactly are we speaking of, it means different things to different people based on their own personal experience and ideas. And so we've got to define the term. And it's unfortunate that we maybe don't have some more nuanced words. I don't know if it's a failure of the English language, a shortcoming of the English language, to be able to describe things with more detail. Discipleship, I mean, we might broadly be talking about people maturing in their faith, which is, I think, a good use of the term. We speak about a discipleship pathway, which is like, it's a strategy. It's an order of things to help people mature with intentionality. Discipling, like, what does that mean? I'm meeting with somebody for coffee, or we're having a Bible study together. I mean, there's all these things in which the root word discipleship gets interchanged. And if we don't have great clarity in this, again, we are definitely not heading in the right direction together. So, and then so that is the first part. So similarly, like knowing what the Great Commission is, defining the term in the context that we're discussing it. But again, how does this actually work in our church? We often say, Scott, this when we're working with church teams and talking to pastors, discipleship isn't a thing the church does. It's everything the church does. It really is all encompassing. See Great Commission go read the Great Commission again. You'll understand what we're talking about. But again, if our leaders, if our decision makers and our team members don't understand, hey guys, here's how this all relates back to our mission and how every piece is a component of discipleship, then again, we're probably not operating at the highest level of efficiency in our church goals. So this is another really important piece.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. And I think that one of the challenging things is that we maybe use the same words different ways. And the reality is that it doesn't matter that much so long as there's clarity amongst your people on what you mean by this.
Yeah.
And there often just isn't. Everyone comes to the situation with their own assumptions and with their own baggage and their own associations with what discipleship is and what it isn't. And it's the job of the leader to you should assume that it's not clear what discipleship is, and then be regularly communicating how your church is shaping and forming disciples. That's there will never be a point, or there should never be a point in the life of your church where you can go, we can stop talking about this now. Because in theory, at least, there will always be people who are new or people who haven't caught on yet. And so you're never done. You're never done talking about, this is how we do discipleship here. This is what a disciple looks like. This is how we're measuring discipleship. These are our goals for discipleship. If you get tired of talking about that, you're in the wrong business. What are we doing? It is the whole thing, as you said, AJ. It's all of what the church does. And if you get tired of talking about it, you probably need to find a different calling, because that is the work. It's the whole work.
Yeah. All right. So we've got some things that you can do to help alleviate this disconnect between what you know and what you assume other people know and moving to the point in which everybody's up on the same page. So the first one, obviously, some leadership training, helping develop people. Don't assume that they have the knowledge that you expect them to have. Make sure they have the knowledge that you expect them to have. It's not rocket science. You're like, oh, wow, that's revolutionary. Let's train people. Well, you might not be doing it though. So you're going to hear us say it today on the podcast.
Yep.
So yeah, but yeah, training. Well, Scott, you can elaborate on the nature of training in the church, because a lot of times we don't do a good job of training. We don't think about training from more of a holistic point of view, in which we can execute it with more effectiveness.
Well, yeah, I mean, I would just say we typically think if we see our folks being ineffective to any degree, we think, oh, let's just have a training meeting. And training meetings are relatively ineffective, actually. There are certain circumstances where they're good when someone's new, you're trying to get them onboarded, or when you're tackling a new initiative, kind of getting a baseline of knowledge. But if they've gotten a baseline information, having another meeting probably isn't going to improve their performance. And so you need to use other tools to help boost that. So the use of job descriptions, the use of coaching feedback, so not group meetings, but one-on-one meetings where I can meet with you and go, hey, let's review our competencies for what we expect out of our elders. Where do you see that you need to grow? What do you feel like is the biggest challenge for you? And having that dialogue and conversation and letting them kind of work that out themselves and go, man, I'm really struggling on this communication piece. Or, hey, I really feel like I'm not pulling my weight when it comes to I don't know, emotional intelligence. Like I'm just getting frustrated with people. I'm not able to empathize with them and bear their burdens or whatever it might be. You can have a dialogue around that, and we can increase that competency. But just getting your guys in a room, or getting a team of folks in the room and talking at them for 90 minutes probably is not going to move the needle very much at all. And so if you want to boost that competency, yes, training meetings initially to give a baseline, but long term, that's probably not the solution.
Yeah. So the next one is to encourage two-way communication. Whenever we've got more one-on-one with our folks and we've developed a culture in which they're comfortable communicating with us, that's a better opportunity, not only to maybe on our end as leaders to be able to bring to the surface some knowledge gaps, but for them, if they begin to maybe perceive there's a knowledge gap, to be comfortable bringing that up and asking about it. And so, another part, we talk in Leadership Pipeline also about doing staff and volunteer evaluations. This is a great opportunity for two-way communication, that somebody and the person that they report to can just have a good dialogue about things. So that's an opportunity, at least annually, hopefully more often than that, not for a full evaluation, but for these types of meetings to take place, in which people can be comfortable enough to talk with you about that.
Yeah, totally agree. I think the more that we can do one-on-one with folks, the more effective we're going to be in getting more out of them. And then you also start to get a better understanding of what it is that they don't know. You start to go, oh, okay, you thought this. And you can start to pinpoint where the specific gaps, rather than, that's a whole nother level of assumption, right? Assuming that what they know and what they don't know, versus pinpointing and going, okay, here's where the specific gap is, and trying to fill that in.
Oh, it makes me think of that an old Seinfeld episode. So I don't know, you young folks maybe aren't going to track with me, Scott. I think you'll remember this. Kramer starts doing a job at this company that he didn't even work for. He ends up just kind of like, I don't know, not volunteering, but he's just there. He's going to work every day, and the boss calls him in, and he's like, Kramer, these reports you submitted, it's terrible. It's as if you don't know anything about what we do here. And he's like, I'm going to have to let you go. And Kramer's like, well, I don't even work here. But I mean, Kramer's in there every day doing a job, and he obviously doesn't know what's going on. And the boss is finally like, yeah, you don't know what we're doing.
Yeah, is also the other another Seinfeld episode where George says that the way that he avoids people asking him too many questions is to just look annoyed. You just be, you look, if you can go, then
And then they're like,
you,
oh,
he's busy.
yeah. Yeah. Always walk through the halls really fast with your like very focused. Nobody
Yeah,
will stop and
focus.
talk to you. Like, man, they're really productive. Look at that.
That's
All right.
right.
Our third one is that whenever we're introducing anything new, initiatives, strategies to our teams first, and then later to the church, is make sure you just very, very clear. I mean, what exactly are we doing? But the why behind it is another opportunity to be able to make these connection points back. How does this relate to evangelism? How does this relate to our mission? How does this relate to our discipleship pathway, our vision? So over communicating, great clarity in communication is an opportunity for us as leaders to make sure that the team gets it like we get it.
Yep. Nothing to add there. Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think we've already said it.
Yeah. Our fourth one kind of touched on this a moment ago as well, but evaluating understanding. I mean, some suggestions being, surveys, meetings, informal check-ins. But this definitely would come in any formal evaluations that we do with our team members, which you should be doing, by the way. Uh,
Mhm.
but yeah, again, this is one of those two-way communication pieces where you can get either direct information back or through some survey mechanism to be able to get information back.
Yeah, this is one we touch on it in a big way in the leadership pipeline process.
Mhm.
Just a reminder, you can go to leadership malfersgroup.com/leadership no hyphen slash pipeline hyphen cohort. That's the link. malfersgroup.com/pipeline hyphen cohort. And one of the things that we work on is assessments that we use with leaders. You need to be able to assess your leaders. And this is something that maybe your staff gets assessed, or if you're a solo pastor, maybe you get some sort of an annual review, but we're never assessing our board. We're never assessing our volunteers. And these don't need to be difficult assessments. And we don't teach things that are really hard to do. These are simple assessments that help to eliminate any sort of competency bias and to increase the competency of all of our leaders. And so if you're thinking, how would I even do that? I would encourage you to sign up for the cohort. We'll help you build specific custom assessments that you would use in your particular context.
Yeah. The next one I think is sometimes overlooked, maybe commonly overlooked, and that's to develop a culture of learning, continual learning. And I think could be accomplished in a variety of ways. Continuing education budget would be good. That there's money set aside so that people can get training in various aspects of their
They
job
could sign up for the leadership pipeline cohort.
at
Perhaps.
malfersgroup.com/leadership dash cohort.
No, pipeline
Oh,
dash cohort.
pipeline dash
We're the
cohort. We will
worst. We're
link
the
it.
worst.
We
Yeah,
will link.
link it in the post.
um, but yeah, these are things you could do with your team as well, reading particular books together, things like that. But yeah, a culture of learning.
Yeah, for sure.
All right.
Last one on this list, AJ, is one of my favorites, which
Yes.
is job descriptions.
Mm,
It's just so basic, and you might think that this is basic, but this is an area of a competency bias from our perspective, in the sense that I kind of go into most churches assuming that they're going to have job descriptions for most of their volunteers, and I'm almost always shocked to find out that, like, maybe the children's ministry does, or some other random ministry has them, but most of them don't, or they're not consistent. Like they're not formatted the same way across ministries, where they don't have them for elders, but they have them for volunteers, where they don't have them for staff, but they have them for. I mean, the where you have them and where you don't have them always shocks me. And you need them. How can someone be successful in a role you haven't clearly defined? You have set them up to fail.
yeah. 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 This should be simple, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, how can you meet expectations that aren't articulated? It's
Right.
not fair to you. It's not fair to them. It's not fair to your church.
Yeah.
Uh, People can't rise to an occasion that they're not even sure exactly what that is.
Yeah.
And
And
way more people will quit volunteering at your church because they're frustrated and feeling like they're not meeting the expectations that they're not sure what they are. Then we'll quit because, oh no, it seems like this is a full-time job because you've given me a job description. Trust me, people would love to have one.
mhm.
I've
Yeah.
never heard someone complain about having a job description as a volunteer. But lots of people quit. Loads of people quit because they're like, I don't even know what it is that is expected of me.
Yeah. Totally agree. Yep.
Which is, by the way, another thing that if you go through the pipeline cohort, malforsgroup.com/pipeline-cohort and sign up there. By the end of that cohort, you will have job descriptions for all of your positions in the church.
That sounds like a win. And that starts in January.
January. Yeah.
You still have time to sign up for that.
Yep.
And that would be a great experience. Okay. There you go, Scott. I think we can improve the performance of our church teams by ensuring they know what we know, that we have clear expectations, and that we're all working together towards the same things with the same understanding.
And ensuring that they know what we already thought that they knew.
Yes, that's right. All right. Well, there you go. Hey, we're not going to see you guys over Christmas. Christmas is about to be here. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Probably take a week off for Christmas.
Merry
So
Christmas, everybody, and Happy New Year. We'll catch you at the end of the year and moving on into 2024. This has been episode 221 of the Church Revitalization Podcast. So you can go to malforsgroup.com/221, where you will also find the link to the Leadership
Pipeline cohort.
And you
it
can
might
click
also
on that.
be in the YouTube description below, probably.
Yeah. You can click on that donate button as well, because as you know, we would love to have your support to do our global ministry work that we do, taking this podcast around the world and taking ourselves around the world to work with church teams so that they have clear expectations amongst their church about how to make and mature disciples of Jesus. Help us do that, won't you? Yes.
On that note,
Uh-huh.
I have this app on my phone that I know you don't have because you have an Android. I'm outing you on the podcast as an Android user.
As an awesome phone user, thank you. I appreciate that.
Okay, well, one awesome app that you don't have access to on Android is Flighty.
Mm-hmm.
And I was looking at my Flighty year in review summary, which as of the recording of this podcast, I actually have a few more flights to go.
Okay.
So this isn't totally complete. But at the recording of this episode, 79 flights total for the year, 67,972 miles, 6 countries. And I was
Nice.
like, I was in 6 countries this year. And then I was like, that can't be right. And yeah, no, I was.
Man. Well, that's cool.
I mean, it includes the United States. So I feel like
so 5 other countries.
5 non-American countries.
Wow.
Canada. Yeah, Canada, the UK, Portugal, Germany,
Mm-hmm. And Turkey.
and Turkey.
Good job, Scott. I'll have to manually.
You have to that's what I was gonna say. I was gonna be like,
Yeah.
show me your Flighty.
I
but
do wish I had that. I would like to have Flighty. I wish I did. So
yeah.
So there you go. I can, if there's any question, let's not make sure we don't have a knowledge gap with our listeners. Traveling 79 times takes a lot of money. Flying isn't free, and traveling to other countries isn't. And that's what clicking on the donate button up there helps do, is get us to these places and the online resources that we continue to produce and maintain. So lots and lots of pastors and churches and teams and people are affected worldwide. Help us do that. We'd love to have you.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the cool part, is thinking about like all the churches that we're able to serve that are, I feel like it also requires some context, like 79 flights. I live near a little regional airport. So anytime I go anywhere, it's like a minimum of 4 flights in one round trip. So those flights kind of add up quickly. But it is cool to see the little pinpoints on the map of all the places and the memories, and just thinking of those individuals that I got to serve this year, and what a blessing. So
Yeah.
thank you guys for enabling the ministry, and for those who in the United States who pay for their own services to work with us. Thank you. Thank you for inviting us into your churches and allowing us to serve you.
Amen. We'll be doing that again in 2024. We'll see you out there on the road. Thanks for listening, everybody. See you next time.
Yeah.